Alrighty, whereas the past few episodes of The Flash have really focused on improving the main character's physical limitations and, having him get strong enough or having to outsmart the bad guy or whatever. This episode, a recurring theme on it was, maintaining relationships and what someone would go to actually strengthen a said relationship. Now, what happens in this episode? Well, there's a new metahuman in town. I don't know her. The only real code name that I can think of is the one that Caitlin came up with, which I'm not going to call her that, or at least not without some comic book fan telling me that that is actually her name. Then I'll start calling her that. But for now, I'm just going to call her Shauna. So Shauna is this metahuman, she basically has the power to teleport. So she uses it to break her boyfriend out of the slammer, and the two of them basically go on a crime spree, sort of a Bonnie and Clyde type thing. So while Barry does have to deal with that, there is also the issue of him trying to deal with the fact that he can't really be with Iris because she's with Eddie, and he tries to move on. And that actually draws some interesting parallels between him and Caitlin, who is desiring to move on from Ronnie. Now, speaking of Ronnie, Cisco questions Hartley about what he said in the previous episode, which was, "I know what happened to Ronnie." So Cisco basically goes into his own private investigation. While at the same time, John Wesley Shipp's character, Barry Allen's father in prison, tries to help out his son by getting some information on Shauna and her boyfriend. So that basically does it for this episode. And yeah, I like this one a lot more than I thought I would. When I saw the commercials, I just thought, well, it's probably just going to be an unspectacular filler episode or one of those episodic, self-contained episodes that don't really contribute much to the overall plot. And on paper, it sort of was, but in terms of actually strengthening character relationships and allowing these characters some time to breathe, I actually really enjoyed it. Now, first of all, what I thought was the best part of this episode were the interactions between Barry and Caitlin. Now, not only were these scenes played just right, not too much for laughs, but at the same time not too much going for melodrama, they found just the right balance. The Grant Gustin and Danielle Pennebaker, they played these scenes very well, and I do like the dynamic between those two. I like how they're developing this friendship. I hope, there are probably people out there who have some sort of name for these two, wanting them to be a couple. I really don't know, but I don't know. I sort of view this in the same light as I view the relationship between Jaime Lannister and Brienne in Game of Thrones, where I think it's more interesting if it's not a romantic relationship. However, that being said, I can't really say I would necessarily blame Barry for wanting to go after Dr. Snow, considering she is frickin' Danielle Pennebaker, but I digress. Now, in conjunction with those fairly enjoyable scenes, we actually got a guest star, which I actually think the previews were a little misleading, because this particular guest star, Malise Zhao, another chick from Starcrossed, another person from Starcrossed, on top of the meathead who played the Steel guy toward the beginning of the show. But basically, she comes in as this reporter who works at the same firm that Iris does, granted in a different department. And she meets up with Barry, and they strike up what could be the start of a relationship. And yeah, in conjunction with that, I keep saying that, but there also affords some more dramatic material for John Wesley Shipp to work with this time around, because John Wesley Shipp, he takes a risk and he actually pays the consequences for it. Now, thankfully, those consequences are not terminal, but it was a close one, and Barry and his dad have another heart-to-heart. They grow closer, and that was actually... I take back my previous statement. This was probably my favorite moment in the episode. Granted, part of it could be due to the fact that John Wesley Shipp was the original Flash, and this could be seen by some as him sort of passing the torch to Grant Gustin, but from how this scene was played, from how both actors played it, from the chemistry that they have with each other, from the dialogue, everything about the scene just seemed so genuine and so warm and welcoming. How basically John Wesley Shipp insinuates that he knows that his son is the Flash, and he tells him, and he sort of gives him a little heart to heart. That was actually a really sweet moment. So, what about the villain? The villainess, again, this was another refreshing aspect of the episode, because this was someone who in the previews I was thinking, okay, is she going to be this sort of sadistic, flirty type that we sometimes see in these superhero shows? But again, they go a different route. She actually has sort of an unhealthy relationship with her boyfriend in that she really is devoted to him. She loves him, even though he just sort of sees her as a means to an end. Granted, I think it would have helped if they went more into that, but if they did, that would have taken time away from the main characters, which I liked pretty much all the material that the main characters got to work with in this episode. So with that being said, it was actually really refreshing that the villainess was not quote-unquote evil. She was a thief. She used her powers for personal gain, but part of the reason she did it was out of devotion to her boyfriend, and yeah, she really had no sadistic intentions here. She really just wanted to pay off her boyfriend's debt, and they could run away together on some sort of retirement tours, or whatever you want to call it. Two criminals finally hanging it all up. So that sort of aspiration is what primarily drove her this episode, which again I found pretty refreshing. So yeah, this episode was a fairly enjoyable one. Lot more enjoyable than it probably should have been, considering it doesn't really advance the overall plot much. But if I had to pick one series of scenes that I didn't particularly care for, it was the scenes between Cisco and Hartley, who was, as you know, Pied Piper in the previous episode. I actually thought they were taking the smarter route, because Cisco lets Hartley out on the condition that Hartley show and explain to him what happened to Ronnie. And at first I was like, oh God, really, are they doing this? Because this is just going to paint Cisco as this very stupid, naive character who I can't root for because he is so stupid. But the first time when Hartley tried to escape, Cisco actually pushed this little button, and it let off this, I don't even know what it was. It was like, you know, those special dog whistles that emit those high-pitched noises? It was sort of like that. Whatever it did, it caused Hartley massive amounts of pain because of this little machine in his ear. So the fact that he actually had this sort of, this shock collar, as it were, on Hartley, this sort of leash, I actually thought, oh, okay, so this might not play out as I feared. So that was actually pretty good. I said, okay, I'll give Cisco points for that. He's not taking any chances. But then, sure enough, later in the episode, Hartley, while Cisco is looking at something, Hartley takes the thing out of his ear and knocks Cisco out with the same device. So I said, oh, God, why did they even bother throwing me for a loop if they were just going to do that? So that was one series of scenes that I didn't particularly care for. But, of course, we have to talk about the scene at the end of the episode. It didn't really tie into anything else in the episode, which I found kind of strange, but basically it's a scene that tells us Gorilla Grodd is alive and well. He's living underground, and he kills two construction guys or maintenance guys, whatever, two workers who come down into the tunnel to investigate something. Gorilla Grodd comes out of the shadows and kills them, and you don't see Gorilla Grodd, so I have to give him points for that. You don't see Gorilla Grodd yet. They're keeping that a mystery until his debut. But again, I said this in a previous vlog I did, I have no idea how they're going to do this and make it look convincing. And they actually made a smart decision this time around by, again, keeping him in the shadows, so they don't actually have to render a fully CG model of Gorilla Grodd yet. But up until this point, they've tried to use CGI relatively sparingly, except when they absolutely needed to, like the teleporting and the Flash running. But they don't overexploit CGI, except when it comes to Grodd. If they use an animatronic, then you could run the risk of it looking not real. If they use CGI, then you could run the risk of it looking really not real. So, again, I have no idea how they're going to do this and make it look convincing with a TV budget. We'll just have to wait and see. I am kind of curious to see if they are just going to completely destroy any credibility they have by introducing Grodd so soon. But again, we'll just have to wait and see.